So then we look at what is a gauge of success. And up until recently, basically, we looked at vegetative biomass, everything that you can see from a satellite looking down, and we say, oh, there's a big crop and it's going to produce 10 million tonnes, and then it gets downgraded as the rain stops falling or we get frost. But what happens is that we've missed the major part of what's going on in the system, and that's underground. And so suddenly the thing that you don't see is probably the most important driver. And so when we start looking in the soil and looking in minute parts of the soil, suddenly we can start to see the things that are actually driving the success. And that's in the microbiology. So how is grow-safe farming different to conventional farming? Well, effectively it looks very similar. We use the same equipment, we put it on the same soil types, we grow the same kind of crops. What's the difference? Basically it comes down to what we put into the black box, and we'll discuss what the black box is in a while. Okay, so with conventional farming, what we look at is fairly high inputs of nutrients, of water-soluble chemicals. Basically, the green revolution is based on the ability to put a lot of fertiliser out, water-soluble, and rely on water to wash it through. We've also relied more and more on agricultural chemicals to drive the system. And so we end up with a result. And during the green revolution, we've been able to feed the world basically because we've been able to increase our yields, increase the quality and so on. And ultimately we've had a net return. The problem is that we're in a changing climate, and the green revolution is reaching its peak. What we find with grow-safe farming is that we use smaller inputs, particularly of N and P, and so peak phosphorus and peak oil and so on don't affect us so much because we rely on high nutrient use efficiency of the nutrients, the fertilisers, the minerals and so on, because they're driven through a biological system. And we end up with similar results in terms of yield, but more importantly we end up with better quality, less residues in the food, more nutrient dense foods and so on. And ultimately because of this we end up in the longer term with high net return. And so we're entering the phase of the brown revolution, which is all to do with soil biological farming. And the most important difference between these two systems is in water. This system is a soluble water system that's driven through high rainfall, that we rely on rainfall in dry land agriculture to wash the nutrients past the root system in the soil to drive the system. In the biological system, what happens is we require less water to drive the system because the microbes are able to go out and source nutrients and bring them back. And so that's the big difference between the two systems. So what is in the black box? If we take a look inside the soil, basically under conventional systems we've treated the soil as an anchor, basically so we don't lose our crops, either wash away or blow away. But when we start looking into a biological system, we realise that we need to have a high amount of nutrients within the soil. And so basically life, whether it be animal or man, relies on about 65 different trace minerals in a form that are not water soluble, so they're not going to wash out into the ocean and so on. We require organic matter, the humus, that holds nutrients in the soil, like cation exchanges, and holds onto water. And then we need bacteria. In a healthy soil, we're looking at about 1 billion bacteria per gram of soil. And these things do all sorts of things within the soil. And rather than treating them as the enemy, something that we have to kill, what they do is they drive our system, whether it be nutrient extraction and passing on to the plants, or in transporting water to the plant, or in defending the plant against disease. Things like nitrogen fixation we have within the legumes, right? So we have bacteria that live in there, fix nitrogen from the atmosphere, and so we get nitrogen nutrition through the biology. We have these mycorrhizal fungi that attach the roots and grow out into the rhizosphere, which help bring nutrients close to the plant, and they make nutrients more accessible to the plants. And so if we have a look through an electron microscope or a confocal microscope, you can see we've got a root system here, the mycorrhiza attached to the plant, and grow out and wrap around, say, mineral aggregates, soil aggregates, and that green stuff is the actual fungi eating the nutrients and passing it back into the plant. So what happens is you don't need to have so much water. Under the conventional system, you have to have water washing soluble nutrients past the root system. In a biological one, a mycorrhiza can grow out and find nutrients at a distance. Likewise, they can find water and bring them into the plant. So we get far more effective nutrient management as well as water management. We also need to have air and water spaces within the system. And we're seeing an awful problem with non-wetting soils now, basically where water and air can't penetrate into the soil. Now this thing is driven aerobically, which means it needs oxygen to drive the system. In the air we also have to have nitrogen, so it can be fixed by the microbes. So we need to have air and water spaces. And things that help that are the microploughs of the soil, the earthworms. So they go in the soil, they create tunnels, they go up to the surface, bring in things like lime and nutrients that are on the surface and bring them down into the root zone and allow oxygen and water into that zone. And then around the roots we have this rhizosphere, which basically is a protecting area around a root system, and the plant actually influences that rhizosphere by putting nutrients out, exudates out into that root zone. So once we start looking inside the black box, we start to see there's a whole load of things that are going on that are more than just putting an MP fertilizer on there. It's about getting this biology working, and once we start to understand that those microbes are involved and the minerals are involved, suddenly we can start to influence what goes on in plant growth. Now, the plant has an influence on the soil. What happens is if we take a look at a legume growing in soil, we have a pH indicator here. What we see is the legume is giving off hydrogen ions and it's very acidic, so a pH around 4.5 in a soil that's about pH 6. If we take a cereal, what happens is it gives out other exudates that gives a pH around 7. So this plant is pumping sugars and nutrients into the soil that's affecting the pH of the soil. And just to show you them growing together, we have the legume here affecting the pH around its root system, and then we have pH on the cereal at a different pH. So these have important influences on how the plant sees the world, the environment around it. Microbes, the biological system, increase that area of pH, and so you can see here the microbiology has created a much bigger zone at a pH of about 7. And 7 is where most of the nutrients, the mineral nutrients, are mobile. At low pH, at around pH 5.5, 4.5, things like aluminium kick in, and then we lock up phosphorus. So that means we've got to put more phosphorus on, more super on, to drive the system. At pH 6, the microbiology can pull those nutrients into the plant, and as a consequence, what happens is we get far better utilisation of those nutrients. So, in the grow-safe farming system, what we're looking at is beneficial bacteria and fungi that pull nutrients into the plant and basically then increase root biomass, increase the organic matter within the system, organic carbon, and also help with soil water management. These are key critical things that are happening within our system, and very much more important now that we are seeing these climate perturbations that are occurring. Same with mineral fertilisers. Basically the difference between a conventional fertiliser, which is acid treated to make it water soluble, the biomineral fertilizers are not acid treated, they're in a natural state, in the natural ore state. And so things like the micas, the soft rock phosphates, alkali feldspars, potassium silicates and things, they're not treated with acid so that they're not soluble, so they're not going to wash away. We're not going to lose them in the environment. They're rich in silica that has an important characteristic of giving cell strength and helping plants resist things like frosting and water stresses. In the mineral fertilisers, we also have about 65 trace minerals that are very important to drive the biological system, either at the microbial level, so we're feeding the microbes, they feed the plants, and the plants then feed the animals and the humans. They can be blended with some soluble fertilisers. And the important thing about the biomineral fertilisers, they've got a low salt index, so when we're putting them on, we're not salting the system and dehydrating it. And most importantly, they're environmentally stable, so they're not going to wash away. And basically, the nutrients are released by microbial action. So, basically, if we have a look at what happens within the system, we have to have some beneficial microbes. And like I said earlier, we've been used to inoculating rhizobia onto our clover pastures and onto our legumes like lupins. Well, we have a blend of microbes now that do beneficial things within the system, the root system, that help either as beneficial bacteria by fixing nitrogen's free livers, or in protecting the plant from attack by disease-causing organisms, or we have microbes that will eat phosphorus and convert them into a form that's biologically available. The other thing is we have beneficial fungi like the mycorrhizal fungi that attach the root and grow out and look for nutrients and pull them back into the plant. Things like the trichodermas that help protect the plant from root diseases and so on. And a whole load of other microorganisms that help rebuild that beneficial soil life. Basically, these are easy to apply. We can put them on in the soil, we can put them on seed, we can put them on as a foliar. They're simple, safe to use. They're like probiotics, but probiotics of the soil. And just to show you, probably in finishing up, what happens to nutrients within the soil. We have a plant growing in a soil medium. If we take a close look at the root system, what happens is we have this thing called depletion zones. Phosphorus is very immobile within the soil, and it relies on the plant putting out exudates to pull phosphorus in, but it only can pull it from about a millimetre away from its root surface. When you go further out from that, phosphorus that's out further is not available to that plant. So we have a phosphorus depletion zone. So it means that you've got to put quite a lot of phosphorus to get enough to wash past the root system in a conventional water system. Nitrogen is slightly more mobile in the soil, and it can move in from about a centimetre away. The plant can suck it in from a centimetre. Once the nitrogen's further out, it's not available to that plant. So we have a nitrogen depletion zone. We have depletion zones for all minerals, all nutritional minerals, and basically we have to apply them in the convention system as highly water soluble so that we can wash it past. And when we rely on rainfall in dry land agriculture to bring those nutrients past the root, when it starts, we get these mid-season droughts like we've been having last 5-10 years, it means that nutrition is becoming an issue, and so we have to put more fertiliser on. So it's the more on type approach. So in this system, basically anything that's outside the depletion zone is not available to that plant, and so we have poor nutrient use efficiency. In the biological system, we have mycorrhiza that can grow out centimetres, inches, even feet from the plant, and so they can bypass these nutritional depletion zones. And so phosphorus and nitrogen, or any trace mineral at distance, can be picked up by the plant. The same with beneficial bacteria. They can move through the soil, through the water medium, and come back and bring nutrients to the plant. And there's a collateral exchange here. The plant releases photosynthate and exudates to the microbes, and in return they pay with phosphorus, nitrogen and so on. So what happens is we start to then have high nutrient use efficiency. We don't need to put so many of those nutrients on because the biology will pull it into the plant. And so what happens is that we're harnessing the beneficial aspects of the biology. And when we do that, suddenly we've got better nutritional uptake, we've got a better density of nutrition within our food, and ultimately we have less of the environmental aspects that come into play, like salinity, like aluminium in the soil locking up phosphorus, issues such as putting on high amounts of residual chemicals and so on, which are ultimately going into the food and into the food chain. So just in summary, what we're doing in biological mineral farming, using this grow safe farming approach, is harnessing the power of microbiology, beneficial soil biology that can go out and grab nutrients from the soil, pull them into the plant very effectively, so we get increased nutrient use efficiency and ultimately more profitable plant growth for the amount of fertiliser we put on. And the takeaway message from today is that we need to balance what we do. We need to balance our chemical side, the physical side, and the biological side of what we do in agriculture. And when we get that part right, then issues such as lower water infiltration and stuff become a thing of the past. The same with diseases, they become a thing of the past. And ultimately then we can cut back on those chemicals. Still use them when we need to, but ultimately we end up with a much more profitable situation. And ultimately sustainability environmentally and as well as economically. Okay, thank you.